Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's episode, we are doing our 7th installment of our Tavour review series. Believe it or not, this is actually still from my very first Tavour shipment, and I saved 3 of what I suspect will be the biggest, richest beers for last. Today we are reviewing the Great Basin Brewing Company's 427 Scytale. This is an Imperial Stout. Clocks in at 11.8%. They are based out of Nevada. Now the 427 is a nod to how many days it was aged, and it was aged in 3 different bourbon barrels, Wild Turkey, Rogue, and Jim Beam. So a lot of time in the barrel. I expect this is going to impart a lot of aroma and a lot of flavor and complexity to what already should be a huge beer as a big ABV Imperial Stout. So very excited. Never tried a beer by Great Basin. I'm really excited to try this one. The second beer is the Drake's Brewing Company Death of the Sun. This is also an Imperial Stout, 14.2% ABV. They are based in California, and this one is bourbon barrel aged in oak, so it's bourbon barrel oak. And then the third beer is the 50/50 Brewing's Eclipse. This is 11%, also an Imperial Stout, also out of California, and this was aged in rye whiskey barrels. So 3 really big, bold, barrel-aged Imperial Stouts that are very high ABV. I'm really excited and really looking forward to jumping right into this one. So without further ado, we'll get started with the Great Basin 427 Scytale. Okay, so getting started with the Great Basin 427 Scytale. Again, this is 11.8% ABV, aged for 427 days across 3 different bourbon barrels. Really excited. I expect this is going to be quite dark and quite thick and probably have a very pronounced nose, but we shall soon see. You know, it's not as thick and molasses-like in the pour as I expected, which is not a bad thing. Looks nice. Let it form a nice tight little foamy head. It may not have the viscosity I expected, but it certainly got the appearance that is pitch black. You cannot see the light of day through this beer. Looks really nice in the glass. Actually has a fair bit of effervescence to it. Again, you've heard me talk about this. Judging a beer's head and head retention when it's not on draft is always a bit of a challenge because there's so many X factors: cleanliness of the glassware, how well you pour it, how poorly you pour it. But this did a decent job out of a bottle here for a nice little tight foamy head, and it's still got some cling with some classic stout head substance to it. So let's give this a sniff. Ooh, that smells really nice. The bourbon barrel is very, very pronounced on the nose on this one, and it also has this rich chocolatey quality to it and almost slight sweetness in the aroma. Comes through very heavily on the nose. And you get some deep, rich fruit like you might expect from a little slightly boozier, heavily malted, bigger Imperial. You get a lot of those rich, deep aromas, and I anticipate flavors as well. Smells amazing, looks amazing. I'm ready to jump right in, so let's see what this is about. Oh, that's delicious. And the finish, oh man, wow, that's so good. It's so good. Oh my gosh. That is just taking me in all sorts of different flavor directions, and it is insanely good. Okay. Wow, it's still going. I'm going to do my best to describe this. I may have to take a few sips to really get this right, but up front, you do get that bite of the bourbon, and you do get that slight sweetness and deep, rich fruitiness I was describing, and then that breaks away probably within the first second or two immediately into heavy bourbon barrel. Heavy bourbon. And then it opens up to rich, almost smoky, deep dark chocolate. Really, really heavily roasted flavor. Very deep, very dark, which I didn't expect because it started so sweet and it had such a nice sweet aroma on the nose. Yeah, let's have another sip here and I'll explain how the finish finishes off from the bourbon section because that's what I want to make sure I explain correctly. Oh, oh, it's so good. It takes the breath away. And it does give you, it's a big ABV and it was bourbon barrel aged. So say it's a little boozy. It's kind of insane, but you can expect that. Not heavily boozy, but you know it's in there. The bourbon breaks away and pairs with this richness, like deeply caramelized, dark brown sugar and rich, rich vanilla. And it's got this earthiness and this woodiness to it that pairs with this just deep, rich, chocolatey character. It is absolutely decadent. This is a decadent beer. I think that this would pair well with a slice of cheesecake. I really do. Maybe even Bananas Foster or Cherries Jubilee. Something rich, maybe something that has a little boozy back to it. Golly, this is such a good beer. This is such a good beer. The mouthfeel is very silky, silky smooth. The body, as you might expect, with that many fermentables in it, it's got a heavier body. It's not super heavy. I would say it teeters between medium and medium heavy, kind of in that range. But it's very nice. It's got substance to it. The mouthfeel is very silky. It's not super, super viscous, but it's viscous enough that it lets all the flavors linger around on the palate so you can really enjoy this super refined, super long, super complex finish. I absolutely love this beer. This is a home run. I'm going to finish taking my time enjoying this, and I will come back and we'll get the ratings at the end as always. But next up, we will move on to the Drake's Brewing Death of the Sun. That's the Bourbon Barrel Imperial Stout at 14.2%, the highest ABV of the bunch. All right, moving on to our second beer of today's delicious Imperial Stout review. We are moving on to the Drake's Brewing Company's Death of the Sun. Again, all of these are Imperial Stouts. They're all barrel aged. This one's the highest ABV by a good margin, 14.5%. This one does come out of California and it is bourbon barrel aged. So first thing I wanted to point out is, and I'm really, really, really hoping the camera can pick this up. This is one of the neatest looking beer labels I've ever seen, and I don't know if the camera is properly picking up, but it's holographic. It's got this foil kind of holographic look to it, and it looks like a black hole. Literally the death of a sun. This would be, if I recall back to my astronomy classes in college, I think it might be a quasar, but I'll have to look it up. I'm so sorry if I'm offending any astronomy heads. It's been many, many years, though I appreciate it. But it looks like a black hole on the label, Death of the Sun, so I assume it's a star collapsing. And it's got this neat foil holograph on it. It's very cool looking. This is one of the neatest beer labels I've ever seen. Bourbon Barrel Aged Imperial Stout at 14.5%. Let's go ahead and get this poured in. Let's just see how thick this looks as I get it poured in the glass. Oh, that's looking really, really thick. Really, really thick. Kind of Prairie Artisan Ales type thick. And I think I can get the whole beer in the glass at an appropriate level. I did. As you can tell, as it just settled here, it got a decent head, especially that I didn't pour it all that well, but it did get a nice head considering how poor the pour was. It's got a classic stout head on it. Tight, 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 tight bubbles, very foamy, not a lot of heavy activity with larger bubbles rising up, ruining the head. I saw a lot of side effervescence from the sides of the glass that was giving the activity of the carbonation releasing. So it's forming a nice head. Let's go ahead and just a slight jostling so we can get a sniff of this. It doesn't have a super pronounced nose. I'm going to jostle a little more just to see if I can break up the head and let the aroma come through. There we go. There we go. Okay. It's still not the most pronounced in the world, but what I can smell does smell nice. The overarching aroma that I'm getting on the nose is indeed the bourbon with a slight sweetness and a slight caramelly chocolatey nature from the deeply roasted malts. So yeah, it does smell good. It's not super pronounced, but what I can smell smells great. Appearance-wise, this is another textbook classic, perfect. I can already tell you this will be a 10 out of 10 on the appearance. You cannot see the light of day through it. That's exactly what I want to see on my Imperial Stouts. I don't care what you put in it, what adjuncts, whatever, what your brewing process. If I can see through an Imperial Stout, I'm going to question whether or not it's actually Imperial. It should be as black as the night, and this absolutely is. This has such a super fine layer of foam left on the head that's just floating on top with really nice cling to the side of the glass. This looks really great, especially considering it's not on a tap. It's not from a tap. This is straight from a bottle, how I poured it. Looks great. Smells great. Let's jump right in and see what it has in store. Oh, 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 oh. As you may have gleaned in the many beer reviews that I've done here, I am a massive fan of stouts, and in particular Imperial Stouts. And this one's very special indeed. Let me dive into here. I really got control of myself because normally I kind of go off on a limb with my initial impression reaction, but I maintained my composure. Let me tell you what I'm tasting. Up front, you get a classic stout, get a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of rich dark fruit, but then it opens up massively into this bourbon barrel, and it is amazingly pronounced. The bourbon barrel aging on this beer is so bourbon barrel forward and so bourbon barrel heavy. Not all barrel-aged beers, be they bourbon, be they whiskey, be they scotch, be they port, be they sherry, be they Bordeaux, any other random wine, it doesn't matter. Not always does the barrel aging aspect of any given beer really move itself in the forefront, but this is one that I think is very barrel age centric. And for me, as an Imperial Stout fan, if you're going to do it and you're going to do it in barrels, why the heck not? This is what I look for in a barrel-aged Imperial Stout. This is so freaking good. I know I've really maintained my composure. I haven't jumped up and down and like gone off and gone nuts on you all, which I often do, but this is so freaking good. It's ridiculous. The layers and layers of complexity and that just peek through in a beautiful little balance of the finish. It's just down in a line, and you get to pick out each individual player, and I love that so much in a proper craft beer. This right here is what craft beer is all about. This is why I do what I do. This beer is a perfect textbook example of why I get so excited about craft beer. This is so good. I wish you could taste this. I'm going to have another sip because it's already blown my mind and I've thought a lot on it, but I want to make sure I nail it for you so I can tell you exactly what it's like. I want you to know. Come to daddy. Okay, yeah. Up front, get that sweetness. Get these really rich fruit. Then it opens up into a milk chocolate. Very milk chocolatey. It's lasting 5, 6, 7 seconds. And then the bourbon barrel starts to take over. And all of the notes that come with that bourbon barrel, all of that vanilla, all of that deep caramelized brown sugar, all of that oaky quality, all of that woodiness. And then it adds this layered richness. And then you start to get that bitter chocolate, that baker's chocolate that mixes with the milk chocolate, and it mixes with the vanilla, and it brings you in mind of like a molten chocolate lava cake that's just been doused with ounces upon ounces of bitter dark baker's chocolate mixed with milk chocolate because it's still got that slight sweetness in the back. It's not super bitter. It's just a kiss on the tongue. And then you just do get the slightest little whisper of the roastiness from the malts. And it's just there in the back. And this is so fine. This beer is so fine. It's so beautifully balanced. It's so multi-layered. This is just a dead sexy beer. It just is. Imperial Stouts, particularly barrel-aged Imperial Stouts, when they are done well, and bravo. I mean, the aces. I've never had a beer from Drake's Brewing out of California. I don't know where they are located in the state, but my word, this is bloody incredible beer, folks. This is bloody incredible beer. This is what got me into craft beer in the first place. I apologize if you can hear my dog barking in the background. I won't be able to reshoot this because it'll ruin my shot, so I'm sorry. But this is so good. It's so layered. It's so complex. I'm going to take my sweet time properly enjoying this to get a full proper rating on our scale. But we will come back for our next beer. That's going to be the 50/50 Eclipse, which is a rye whiskey barreled Imperial Stout at 11%. Another one out of California. All right, moving on to the final beer of today's review, we move to the 50/50 Brewing's Eclipse. This one's 11% ABV. It is just like the others, an Imperial Stout. And this one has been aged in oak, vanilla, rye whiskey barrels. So I'm kind of expecting it's going to impart some very, very big, unique, bold flavors. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this poured in the glass. All right. Formed a nice head, not the tightest bubbles, not super creamy foam, but still formed a nice head on there. Holding this up appearance-wise, as expected, 11% with that many fermentables. You cannot see the light through it at all. It is another one that is just as black as the night, and that's, for me, exactly what I want to see in a nice, big Imperial Stout. Looks really great. Head's already started to fall down a little bit, but it's still holding some structure. Let's give it a sniff. Okay, you can absolutely smell that rye whiskey barrel back that's imparted quite a bit on the aroma. You can still smell the roastiness of the malts in there like you would expect in a traditional Imperial Stout, but the main kind of background aroma that's coming through is imparted from that barrel aging. Smells really nice, looks really nice. Yeah, it smells really good. You can definitely pick up on the vanilla in there too, so that's really quite nice. Let's jump in, have a sip, and see what this one is about. Oh yeah. Oh, that's really nice. Oh, that's really good. Just another one that's an absolute home run. This is very rich, has a very, very long finish. It's still going. You get the classic Imperial Stout, but the main major focus is indeed on that vanilla rye whiskey barrel aging that comes through in the forefront so heavily. It's very present, very, very, very present. You can pick up the rye whiskey, you absolutely get a mouthful of that vanilla too. And it opens up to these really rich, deep, chocolatey and molasses and caramelized brown sugar notes as it continues to move on and just lets you taste that whiskey on the end. And then the malts work into the more roasty nature where you start to get the darker chocolate and it just tapers off and blends beautifully with that vanilla and that whiskey barrel back. It's very, very good. As you might expect, the body is pretty heavy here. I'd say it's medium to medium heavy. Yeah, probably more on the medium heavy end. Mouthfeel wise, it's very viscous. It's very smooth and has a little effervescence that rolls around in there, but it's very viscous indeed. It's got a lot of weight to it. and it really helps all of those flavors stick all around your mouth, and I am certain plays a part to the very, very long, complex finish. There's a lot going on in this beer, and on my second sip, I picked up some different notes I didn't pick up on the first one. You do get a decent mouthful of very deep, rich fruit flavors as well that mixes with all of the aforementioned flavors. It's very nice. I'd say overall it's very well balanced as well. This is a really good example of a barrel-aged Imperial Stout, just like the other two were. It's very nice. I'm going to take my time and think on this while I come up with the scores, and take my time enjoying the rest of this beer. Then we'll be back and get all three of these rated as we do typically. Okay, now that we have gotten to enjoy thoroughly all three of these absolutely fantastic Imperial Stouts, all of them barrel-aged, let's go through and get the ratings. We started with the Great Basin Brewing 427 Scytale. This one was an 11.8% ABV. This was aged in bourbon barrels in 3 different types. That was Wild Turkey, Rogue, and Jim Beam. And this was a fantastic beer. Had a lot going for it. First beer I've ever had from this company, but absolutely fantastic beer. Kicking right off, I'll try to make this quick. I know this video is going to be long, but the aroma was amazing. You don't always get that present of an aroma, but this one really stuck out and really got you excited to taste it. I gave that a 9 out of 10. When we finally did get to taste it, I was absolutely blown away. This was freaking delicious. I highly recommend it. I gave that a perfect 10 out of 10. The body on this one was well above average. Sometimes with Imperial Stouts, they're really big and heavy due to the fermentables, but there's a lot more interplay than just the amount of fermentables that goes in to develop the body and the mouthfeel. But this was still well above average. I gave it 8 out of 10. The mouthfeel, I gave it the exact same. 8 out of 10. It was nice and viscous. Let the flavors really kind of roll around in the mouth and let you keep experiencing that barrel aging and the base beer that went into it. It was very good, well deserving of an 8 out of 10. The finish on this was super long, super layered, and super complex. I gave that a 9 out of 10. The head of the retention on this, I'm going to keep saying it, and I've said it many, many times before. If you're not getting a beer off of the draft, the head and the retention of that head is always a bit of a crapshoot. It can be up to the cleanliness of the glass. It can be up to how well or poorly you pour the beer. In this case, it was pretty good for coming out of a bottle. Certainly, I thought it was well above average in that respect, and I did give it an 8 out of 10. The appearance, as expected, black as night, could not see anything through it. That, for me, is picture perfect for an Imperial Stout, as it should be. Perfect 10 out of 10. For the balance, this was a very, very well-balanced beer. All of the players in it really got to play their part. You could pick out just the depth and the complexity of the various bourbon barrels it rotated through in 427 days in them. It was really very special. I only give it 1 point shy of perfection because I would have liked the bourbon to sustain a little longer across the finish, but that's okay. Still well above average. I gave it a 9 out of 10. The feeling in the intangible category, my subjective thoughts, how it made me feel, I absolutely loved it. I did give that a perfect 10 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, Imperial Stouts in general, I love them. Barrel-aged Imperial Stouts, I enjoy arguably even more, and I thought as an example of a barrel-aged Imperial Stout that this was perfection, so I did give that a 10 out of 10. That brings the total score to a 91 out of 100. Very, very high score indeed, well above average, absolutely worth seeking out. Our second beer was the Drake's Brewing Company Death of the Sun. This was 14.2% ABV, the highest of the bunch. This was bourbon barrel aged. The aroma on this one, it was nice. You could get it. It was above average, but it wasn't quite as upfront as many of them I've had as of late, but I still gave it a 7 out of 10. The taste on this was absolute banger. I loved it. It was so big, it was so rich, it was so complex, and you could taste all of the base stout and all of the bourbon. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. The body on this, I only gave one less point than the taste, and I would have liked it just a little bit bigger, a little bit thicker, a little bit richer, but still well above average, 9 out of 10. The mouthfeel on this one was the exact same. I give that a 9 out of 10. The finish on this was super long. It was super long and lets you really pick out all of the various flavors across the beer, and it just lasted such a long time. I couldn't give it anything less than perfection. I gave it a 10 out of 10. The head and the retention on this one, this poured great from the bottle considering no tap. Certainly well above average and a well-deserved 9 out of 10. The appearance, just like the prior, black as night, picture perfect, 10 out of 10. The balance on this, as you might have guessed from the finish and the balance often go hand in hand like the body and the mouthfeel, though equally they're not always going to be the same, but they were in this instance beautifully balanced, perfection, 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible category, another 10 out of 10 for me. I love this beer. First beer I ever had by Drake's Brewing, and I'm glad I got the opportunity. Finally, as an example of the style, just like the prior, this is another world-class barrel-aged Imperial Stout, and they nailed it, 10 out of 10. That brings the final score on the Drake's Brewing Death of the Sun to a 94 out of 100. Very high scoring beer indeed. Only lost points in a couple of categories, and this one, just like the Scytale, well worth seeking out. That brings us to our third and final beer in our final of my first delivery, number 7 installment of the Tavour review series. That's the 50/50 Brewing's Eclipse, 11% ABV, vanilla rye whiskey, oak barrels. Just another delicious beer. The aroma, this one was a little more pronounced than the Drake's Brewing, but just a little under the Great Basin, so I split the difference. I gave it an 8 out of 10, still well above average and well deserved. The taste on this one, just like the prior two, I gave it a perfect 10 out of 10. It was absolutely freaking incredible. I loved it. The body on this one was huge, big, heavy body. Even at 11%, which is the lowest ABV, it had such substance. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. The mouthfeel on this one, it was indeed very viscous and it was very smooth, but even that, I still got to be critical. I would have liked a little more viscosity considering the high ABV and just a little more thickness to it to let it stick even longer. And don't get me wrong, it was fantastic. As is evidenced by the score, I did give it a 9 out of 10, and it's certainly well above average, just shy of perfection. The finish on this, I also gave a 9 out of 10. It was so close to being perfect. The only thing I would have liked a little more is if some of the base malts played a bigger part into that long finish, and if I had a little bit more of that vanilla from the vanilla rye oak barrel and a little more oak, I probably would have given it perfect, but still fantastic. Score 9 out of 10. The head and the retention, this one was great. I gave it the exact same as I gave the second beer, the Death of the Sun, 9 out of 10. It did a great job from the bottle. For the appearance, just like the prior two, black as night, perfect 10 out of 10. The balance on this one, related to the finish, I only docked 1 point, so I did give it a 9 out of 10, and it's for the same reasons that I mentioned in the finish. The feeling and the intangible, I absolutely love this beer. I gave this a 9 out of 10. I only docked it just because I would have liked a little more wood from the oak and a little more vanilla. But other than that, my subjective thoughts were absolutely stellar beer. Finally, as an example of the style, I gave this one a 9 out of 10. Now, I did dock 1 point comparative to the other two, and it really comes back to that vanilla and the oak. If I had just gotten a little more of that in the finish, a little more presence in the flavor, I probably would have given it a perfect score, but it was just a subtle hint, and sometimes subtlety is nice, but not in a big, bold, barrel-aged Imperial Stout for me. It should be very forward, very big, and very present. So still 9 out of 10. That's an exceptional score. That brings the grand total on the 50/50 Eclipse to a 92 out of 100. So a whopping total of 3-point spread between these. All three of these beers, top tier, absolutely well worth seeking if you can get your hands on them. And this first experience I had with Tavour has been so positive. I'm looking forward to doing many more Tavour-based reviews for you guys, getting even more beers that maybe you would never hear about, see about, get your hands on otherwise, maybe get more people on board with signing up with Tavour, I highly recommend it. It's been an absolutely pleasurable experience for me thus far, and I certainly do encourage you to at least look into it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap this up. As always, I thank you so much. I hope you learned something today. I hope you were at least mildly entertained, and really, really do appreciate you joining in and learning some more about some more beers out there. It's not about me. It's really about the craft beer brewers that we all love and get to enjoy, and it's about just keeping them alive and keeping this passionate niche group of craft beer enthusiasts out there fully informed, letting you know what's out there, giving you my unadulterated thoughts, and sharing my experience. So hopefully you can either find something new or get an idea of what you might want to try next. That's what it's all about. If you want to keep in the loop, you can click the notification bell. That'll let you know when all of our episodes go live. We're starting out in the opening months of this new channel we're building, 2 episodes per week. If you want to know right when they drop, you can click the notification bell. As we are trying to grow our channel, I really do appreciate if you found some value or entertainment value in this content. Please do consider liking and subscribing. It really helps others find us and really does help us get on the map to try to spread the word about proper, excellent craft beer. Thank you so much. Feel free to share this link with anybody you know you think might enjoy it. And as always, until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We will see you on the next one. Cheers.